Thanks, Tom, for the help. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Gary Kluckstall. It's a privilege to be here. It's a privilege to really be anywhere. And I want to thank Jimmy and whoever else was responsible for getting me to come share a little bit with you about me and some of the experience that I've had. I'm so glad you read that paragraph out of the big book, because that to me sums it up. So I think I'll start with making just some observations about AA based on my experience as a delegate and later on as a trustee to the General Service Board. I was a delegate in the dark days of AA back in the 90s. Oh, this crowd's serious. I can tell right now. Bob was sharing with me last night at dinner. He says, "You're going to kick this thing off, huh?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, I'm a little concerned." You know, he said, "You're going to set the tone." And I said, "Yeah, well, we'll see who shows up." But I think those experiences in general service certainly have given me perhaps a unique perspective. I'm one of only 225 members of Alcoholics Anonymous who have served at that level. And that puts you in the rarefied air of the bottom of the food chain. You know? And I think of those 225, perhaps half of us are still alive. So we don't really have a whole wealth of folks that had experience. In fact, we don't have anybody left as a trustee that's living that served when Bill was still active in the conference. So we're relying a lot on folklore and, you know, anecdotal evidence of the fact that Bill was even alive. And so we're in a brave new world, I suppose. But I do want to make some observations about Alcoholics Anonymous. And, you know, you can either agree or disagree, and I'm sure a lot of you will disagree, and I can tell because you're going to walk out. But just remember, I don't speak for AA. In fact, the General Service Board really wishes I'd just stay home. I've been known to get a little loose up here, so in my loving observations. But I'm very glad you read that paragraph. I think when we put this work on a service plane, and I see that happening all the time in AA today, I think we just absolutely set up wrong dependence. And that's not helpful. We think we're being helpful. Give you an example. A corrections committee decides it's going to put a big book in every cell. Welcome to jail, here's your big book. And, you know, that kind of makes us look like the Gideons. You know, welcome to your motel room, here's your Bible. And, you know, we might have some people that don't like the Bible. And we might have some people in jail that don't like the big book. But what we've done is we've made a service. We've provided a service. And the service doesn't involve the person, A, asking for help, and I think that's critical. B, they don't got any financial stake in the outcome of this thing. I believe in getting skin in the game. And C, it's there for the taking. We give them everything on a silver platter. I have the same observation about phone lists. I've seen a lot of phone lists get abused. To tell you a little story about an old home group I had in Lakewood, Colorado. We had a phone list, and we also had a chairperson come in who decided that it was okay not to have people that needed court slips signed to stay for the whole meeting. So he signed all the court slips up front, and two of the guys walked out and went across the alley and robbed Sir Freddie's liquor store. And they used their little sheet as an alibi. So the cops came in and tried to investigate, and what they did was they grabbed a phone list and just took it back to the office and started calling people in for questioning. And a lieutenant that was friendly to our cause said, we're not going to do that. So, but the group had to have a group conscience over that, and what we decided to do is, A, we're not going to sign any more quote slips. We can cooperate with jails and with other entities that claim jurisdiction, but our group decided we're not going to do any more of that. There's 1,400 meetings a week in Denver. I'm quite sure if you want to get something signed, you can find some group that'll do that, but our group wasn't going to do it. And the second thing we decided was we're going to do away with all the phone lists. Now, why would we do something like that? Because the newcomer needs to learn how to ask for help. And if we just give them a phone list and, say, hoo-hoo, here you go, we don't even know if the phone list is current. Half of them might be drunk. That's the thing about a list in AA. They're no good. Because I tell you what, tonight there's a bunch of people that were not members of AA that will be tomorrow. And there's a bunch of people that were members tonight that ain't going to be tomorrow. See, and that's how it changes so fast. But we think that it's really important for the newcomer to be able to go up to somebody and says, I really like what you say, and I'd wondered if we can sit down and have a sponsorship discussion. And that was good. The group I got into, Alcoholics Anonymous, back in Wyoming, they were a hidden group. They were underground. And if you wanted to get a sponsor, that was the one that drug you in. And so you didn't have to decide on who your sponsor is going to be. You got him by default. And some were pretty good and some were marginal at best. But that removed all possibility of needing to make a decision in those ways. When I was a new prospective member, I had a lot of physical impairments. I had a lot of wine sores. I had popped a hole in my esophagus, and it would bleed all the time. And I was having difficulty walking due to some nerve damage that I did drinking some Popsicle whiskey down in Oklahoma. And so I was kind of a, oh my God, kind of newcomer. And this guy, after the first meeting that I went to, his name was Len, he came up to me after the meeting and he said something that I've never forgotten. He said, God, kid, we don't get them like you very often. You are a mess. He said, I want to tell you something. Don't let anybody ever tell you that you can't get well. And I just, I was so dumb, I just believed him. And I didn't have any fight when I got here. I'd been tromped, run over hard, and put up wet. And I didn't have any fight left. So that was my first meeting, and that was on June 21st, 1983, and I've been continuously sober ever since. So I see a little hand fluttering over there. Yeah. You guys are really serious. Lighten up, You're not, look, they're not going to gain any time on me. Okay? We might be here at midnight. I don't know. There's no time frame in AA. We try to keep some kind of a schedule going, but that's doomed to failure from the time we put the numbers on the paper. So don't worry about it, man. Enjoy yourself. Besides, we're having ice cream later, and what the hell's wrong with that? So I got involved in general service at 37 days of sobriety. Now, here's how my invitation worked, and I believe invitation is important in Alcoholics Anonymous. I think that all of us were invited to come to Alcoholics Anonymous, whether it was by a judge, PO, public defender, or in my case, I was 12-stepped in. You don't hear about that very much anymore, but that was my story. And so by invitation, it looked something like this. They called me about midnight on Friday night, about 10 o'clock, I guess. They said, Gary, we're going to come pick you up about 2 in the morning. I said, I quickly ran through my Rolodex of important social commitments I'd made, which turned up to be a blank. And I said, well, where are we going? He said, none of your business. I knew you may want to pack a bag, and believe me, it's going to all be about you. So I signed right up. And I got in the car, which happened to be a 1972 Plymouth Fury cop car with the newcomer locks. And I was in the back seat. And so they hauled me over the mountain to Gillette, Wyoming. And my job, a lot of you probably don't know this, so I'll just share it with you briefly. My job was to take a box cutter and cut covers off the big books, the hardcover big books, so we could get them into jails. Now, why were we doing that? Because at that time, we didn't have any soft-cover big books. The only thing we had was old B10, the big hardcover, that's all we had. And so I did it with a flourish, apparently. Defacing the Holy Scripture, I kind of like that stuff. And anyway, we didn't have to stay. Of course, we have to eat. We eat a big lunch and having a big time. And then I love AA meetings, service meetings. They start in one place, go around, end up right where they started. Nothing gets fixed, nothing gets changed. God, it's like watching paint dry. And I had the answers, of course, 37 days sober. Just ask me, I'll help you. And they weren't having any of that. So we're in the car on our way back, and I leaned over from the back seat to the front, and I said, you know what? There wasn't nothing there about me. Now, the two guys that were driving were named Bert and Ernie. You can't make this up. I mean, these guys they were Bert and Ernie. Bert looked at Ernie looked at Bert, and said, God, we have never seen anybody get it so quick. And I always remembered that, too. At some point in the game, it's no longer about me. And I think the earlier that happens, the better. We turn our thoughts and attentions to someone we can help. In that sentence is packed a whole bunch of information and a whole bunch of experience. But if the surest, truest way to be out of self is to give yourself untirelessly to the business of helping another alcoholic to find and achieve sobriety. And there is nothing that works any better than that. I don't care what kind of in Colorado we have legal pot, so there's a lot of marijuana maintenance going on, all of it justified. It's legal, and boy, we'll try every shortcut there is. But we just say, well, you won't be here long. Our group is heavily focused on, I should tell you my home group. It's called, a really dull name. It's called the Parker Group in Parker, Colorado. So you can't really do anything with that information. When I first moved to Parker in '98, I guess it was, there were 3 groups in the town, and now there's 13. It's prospering there, but our population went from about 19,000 to 65,000 in that same period of time. So we have lots of prospects out there. And we still get them the same old way as I came in, through public information efforts. And we gave every cop in the town a little card that says, we meet on Thursday night, 8 o'clock, here's our location. And the cops will bring them, they'll take them out of the house and bring them to the meeting. And I think that's an example of some of the service opportunities that are out there. Have good working relations with your folks. And we tell the judges, we meet with the judges at least once a year, and we tell them we're not signing court slips. If you want to get somebody to sign a court slip, send them to these meetings, but not to ours, because we don't believe in it. And I know that sounds like heresy and blasphemy, but it's the truth. Most of those folks are there to satisfy some element of their sentencing. And I don't want to question anybody's motives, but what we've seen over the years is we might have 30, 40 people come in a given 6-month period, and not one of them ever stays to be a member. But then we start seeing them on the frequent flyer program, where they're constantly coming in and out. And I'm almost sad for Alcoholics Anonymous and with the relapses and all the other, because I think, truthfully, most of the time people come to Alcoholics Anonymous, they don't get Alcoholics Anonymous. They get some kind of, here's how you start your lawnmower. Or, well, I'm sorry your sheep ran off the cliff. And, you name it, we got an expert in the room that'll cover it. And I just think that that's not Alcoholics Anonymous. To me, the heart and soul of Alcoholics Anonymous is two liars sitting down at a table trying to sort out the truth. I think that's it. Everything that we do, service, conventions, groups, meetings, is intended to provide opportunity for that. I'm going to tell you this, if it gets any tougher than that, I'm going to find me a different deal. This is, I have seen the best in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've seen people perform things that I've seen people suffer through unimaginable pain, and physical pain, emotional pain, loss, grieving. I've seen people soar to the top of the clouds, They are able to reverse themselves financially. Doesn't happen all the time. I myself went broke at 28 years of sobriety. And what did I say? Well, I'm 28 years sober. That shouldn't happen to me. See, so I've already painted myself into a corner. I forgot where I was now, so I guess I'll have to start over. What are the observations? Yeah. Phoneless, yeah. Yeah. I'm not in favor of buying people big books. I'm not in favor of giving people big books. Now, here's how my deal worked. And again, this is all just my experience, my observation. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, my sponsor suggested that I get a big book. And I said, okay, well, where do you go? He said, well, I think we have one in the back closet. Because this group was full of 12 and 12 people. There were 6 members of Alcoholics Anonymous in that town that all had over 30 years, and they all sobered up in the 50s. And the 12 and 12 was brand new at the time, and they thought, man, this was the latest, greatest. And I tried to read it, but it was like, not so much. And so they went and blew the dust off this big book, and then had the temerity to sell it to me. In those days, the big book was $4.65. And now I'm smoking 4 packs of cigarettes, probably one in the meeting. You know, I'm an end-to-end smoker. And but I never had any money, you know. So I learned a couple of things. Number one, get some skin in the game. And also, I have a responsibility to be prepared to go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and take it in. And that means don't walk in there with a C note, trying to look good. They can't make change. So you're going to look like a fool. Unless you want to give them the whole $100, then people are going to suspect your motives for doing that. But so it's up to me to remember to keep a little folded money in my billfold. Not only for meetings, but hey, I might want to buy somebody a cup of coffee. Hey, I might come across a down and outer that needs a meal. There's plenty of reasons to have some money walking around. And I know today we live in the swipe and everything, but I think still cash is cash and it works pretty good. You all right? Yeah, I couldn't tell if that was a loud yawn or what. They sold me the book at $4.65 and put a little 5x8 card with my name on it, and every time I'd make a payment of $1, they would put it down on this little card. And I gave them $1 a month. I know, it sounds ridiculous. That tells you where my priorities were, too. I gave them $1 a month, and I missed a payment. And the guy, the secretary of the group, came up and said, "We noticed you missed a payment." And I said, "Okay, here's my dollar." I think I gave him 4 quarters. And he went ahead and wrote it down. We get down to the last payment, which was 65 cents. And in my magnanimity, I gave him $1 and I said, "You can keep the change." He goes, "Thank you," and checked me off and tore up the card, and that was it. And I just thought, who does that? But it was helped me to understand that nothing is free in Alcoholics Anonymous, except the thing that we get as a result of taking the steps, taking the actions, as a result of trying to be a part of a unified Alcoholics Anonymous behind one thing and one thing only, and that is alcoholism. And also by giving one's life as service to your fellows. And with all of that, we find freedom. See, but I can tell you the price tag gets pretty heavy sometimes as you go along. It does. I was a trustee 2003, and I think a month after I was elected, I was just getting ready to go to my first board weekend. I lost the biggest client I had. And my W-2 income went off 90%, you know. So I worked for this one guy for 2 months, and my wife came down and said, "They haven't paid you for 2 months." I said, "Well, I better give them a call." They said, "Well, we didn't think you could take bad news, but we can't pay you." And I said, "Hell, I'm a product of bad news. We all are in this room. We're not on a high streak here. You know, so this idea that the fellowship can't take bad news, or a recovering alcoholic, or recovered alcoholic better, cannot take bad news is crap. Hell, we've all had bad news, and we know how to handle that bad news. See, so don't ever let bad news get in the way of your progress in this program. I was on the board. I would go to New York between 16 and 20 times a year for 4 years from Denver. And they call it innocuously board weekend. but really it's like Wednesday through Monday. Now, so that's board week. Right? You know, it's a little false advertising in the service manual, which I trust very little, quite frankly. It doesn't really tell the truth about what's required on these things. Now, I know I probably got a little bit different attitude than a lot of people because I think we should go see the alcoholics where they're at, rather than sitting in our fat chairs in our fat group waiting for them to show up. And that's what 12-step work is starting to look like in AA. We just wait for them to come. And they're not coming. Or if they are, they got misguided. Well, it's all the same. This is where the recovery's at. Oh, you can have a field day with those kind of statements. You know. Alcoholics Anonymous does not endorse, finance, or lend its name to any outside facility. Neither does it have an opinion on drug addiction or addiction in general. I'm not even personally sure that alcoholism is a disease. Illness? Yes. Allergy? Yes. Bill always cautioned to stay away from the word disease. It's not up to us. Doctors pronounce people. We don't. We're not professionals. So I'm really careful about using the word disease when I'm working with somebody new or on a 12-step call. I might say, if you're like me, you have an allergy. And that keeps it medically neutral. Now, if they want to believe that it's a disease, okay. If you want to believe it's a disease, all right. That's all right. But I'm just going by what the possible controversies are. Part of the role of the board is to not put the fellowship in a position of public controversy, and yet the AMA has got a standing committee appointed and has had for the last 10 years regarding whether or not alcoholism is a disease. And right now they're tied, even. Half of them don't believe that it is, half of them believe that it is. So I don't know how that's going to end up. But let's suppose it goes to where alcoholism is not a disease. And let's suppose that they decide to retract that statement that they made in 48 and then reinforced it again in 54. That alcoholism is a disease, it's treatable, not curable. Where's that going to put us? You know? We're going to be right in the middle of a controversy. Well, we don't need the heat. I think right now it is really suffering a huge public relations problem and challenge. We got a lot of, if any of you watch TV, well, you're going to see portrayed in a less than favorable light. Oftentimes, these are by people that either had a bad experience or don't know anything about what they're talking about. And I would suspect it's a little bit of both. And we have good working relationships with all the media outlets at the higher levels, but that's not where a lot of the decisions about programming are made. They're made at a lower level, and there's a lot of cynicism. We don't know anything about cynicism, do we? Yeah. I became a big fan of public information. Here's how I knew how to find AA, and it was underground. They had an ad in the newspaper. It said, if you want to drink, that's your business. If you want to stop, that's ours. And then they had 3 phone numbers listed. All 3 of the phone numbers were disconnected. Bingo. Then they had an 800 number, call 800, I'll quit forever, or what the number was. And it was Alcoholics Anonymous in another town. Called that one, disconnected. Had a little seventh tradition problem apparently and couldn't pay the bill. Finally, I found a deputy sheriff who apparently I'd had a run-in with a couple of weeks before in my last blackout. He said I urinated on his boots, which I probably did. And I said, you don't know anybody that's in AA? I don't know where I got that information. He said, yeah, I think I know somebody's connected to that outfit. I'll have them to call you. Don't you run away. Because I was a flight risk. And so he called me. That's how I got 12-stepped. And because somebody had taken the time to put their business card up on the sheriff's dispatcher's bulletin board. And the thing basically was, if you know anybody who wants to stop drinking, have them call me. Now that member took it upon himself to do that little bit, see? And I was the product of that member's sacrifice. So, you know, my whole thing about AA is just what I experienced. When I was, before I came to AA, I tried a number of ways to stop drinking. There was this lay deacon of the Methodist Church. He'd come in, see me in the bars, and say, "God, kid, I don't know what's wrong with you. You got some severe issues." And I say, "Yeah, what do you got for that?" He says, "Well, how about you come to a meeting of the Methodist Men's, and we'll see if we can help you." And I said, "Hell, I'll do anything." So I came, and they decided through some kind of ill-informed group conscience that what they were going to do is come at me like Frankenstein and put their hands on me and pray. Now, I don't know what that makes you feel like. It makes me thirsty. So I ran like hell. Got out of there. I saw a counselor. This guy was supposedly familiar with AA. And he said, "I'll help you or find some resources that'll help you if you turn over all your drug dealers." And I said, "I don't use the stuff. I don't like to use anything that interferes with my drinking." And it all does. And he said, "Well, all alcoholics are drug addicts." I said, "See ya." I said, "See ya," because I certainly was not one of those. I was a straight juicer, I know. Pretty rare almost today, but I got here the honest way, just drinking. And I would drink anything. I drank some Popsicle whiskey down in Oklahoma that when they're cooking shine, they usually use corn. But sometimes they get a little cheap and they start putting fillers in like sawdust. And so when that all cooks up, you got wood alcohol. And it's like drinking rubbing alcohol. And so I was desperate one Sunday, couldn't get a drink. And so the taxi cab showed up with a couple of quarts, mason jars full of this shine and a piece of saran wrap over the top and some rubber bands holding it down. And if I had been paying attention, which I wasn't, I could have looked at those rubber bands. They were starting to get solid, like crunching off. And I thought, well, this couldn't be good. But at the time, it seemed like a good idea. So anyway, I got lit up on that stuff. I burned everything down there big enough to die. And I had a big old burn all the way around my lips and blistered the top of my tongue swelled up. I couldn't talk, which a lot of people were thankful for. I went blind for a half a day. I was, that's where I got the nerve damage in my legs. So when I came to you, I had alcoholic neuropathy. And the old drunks had to show me how to walk and throw my feet because I literally couldn't walk. And they knew all the tricks. And I think the simple old things still work best. Even with today's clientele. I used to hear my story probably 1 out of 6. Today I don't hear it 1 out of 100. But you got to remember, this was in my time and in my place in the world. I'd have never got away with half the crap I got away with in those little towns up in Wyoming and the Dakotas and Montana. If I'd have lived in a big city, I'd have never got away with it. But I did, including beating up a cop one night. He was a bully when he was in school, and they put a badge on him, and I decided he needed straightening out. So he pulled me over one night, and clearly I was drunk. He says, do the roadside sobriety test. I said, I can't even find my legs, Dale. I'm so damn drunk. Take me to the damn jail or something. No, you're going to do the roadside sobriety test. See, this guy used to steal my lunch money. So I had a little bit of a resentment against this cat. And so I fell out of the car and got up, hoisted myself up on the fender, and took about 2 steps and fell down. And he did a bad thing. He started laughing at me. And I got some kind of struck sober. And I got a hold of him. I beat and slapped him until he was on his knees, and took his gun away, and took his little billy club away. They didn't have the shoulder mics in those days. And I handcuffed him to the center post of his car. And then for good measure, I pantsed him and tied his pants around his ankles. The interesting thing was 2 cop cars went by his car. He was right on Main Street. And nobody stopped to help him. How about that? So the next morning, the welcome wagon showed up at my house and said, we're going to kick you out of town. You got 24 hours to clear out. The welcome wagon was the chief of police, the mayor, and my dad, who was on city council. And they said, we got to do something. This place is not big enough for both of you, so you need to leave. A little later on, I was in a meeting somewhere, Tennessee, I think, and somebody was talking about leading a parade of cars out of town as he was being escorted out. He said, I failed to observe that I could have made it look like I was leading a parade. I didn't have any thought about that. But there was a parade of them. Oh, it's crazy. So I was banned from my hometown as a result of that. And later when I got sober and had to make amends to that guy, I saw him at a school reunion. I saw him across the dance floor. And he took one look at me and started running. And so I ran him down. And I jacked him up against the wall of a barn. And I said, you're going to hear this. He said, no, I don't want to hear anything from you. I said, you're going to hear this. This is the 9th step, and you're going to hear it. So I told him, I said, the message was good, but the method of delivery sucked. And he said, I said, you got anything you want from me? He says, I never want to see you again as long as I live. And I said, you got it. Dropped him and went back to the dance. And I never have seen him since. That's pretty good, wouldn't you say? Now, I'm always holding myself in readiness for if he goes around a corner that I might see him. But I don't think so. I don't think he's man enough to do that. Let's see. I have 7 o'clock. I've already dug into the next speaker's time. A couple more short things and then I'll close it up because, you know, I know you guys have been sitting for a long time and my ass is flat and I'm standing up. A couple of little things that I think are important. I think service is not a position. Service is an attitude. And it has to come from here. It can't come from anywhere else. I know people in Alcoholics Anonymous that are what I call aspirers. They're always aspiring to some other position than the one they have. They think if they become the alternate DCM, then they're a shoe-in for the DCM. And what I've observed about that over time is AA elections. Let me tell you something. If you end up with a position as a result of an AA election, you have not won anything. You are the person that is the least objectionable in the room. True. And because we don't vote for people, we vote against somebody else. True. Oh, no, not that guy. So don't think you've won anything. And it's always best if you come out of the hat, I believe. Because that's when I think that's the best part to me of the third legacy. I think that as it was originally intended in the fourth ballot, it gave an opportunity for the one that was behind to throw in their votes to make it unanimous. But we have so many elections nowadays that run 50-50, give or take. And so we go to the hat probably more often now than we used to. And I think that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Tells me a little bit about the quality of the people that are running for these jobs. Standing is the word. So aspirers are not necessarily to be followed. AA leadership is something that it's like herding cats. You can't tell an AA member what to do or not do. Because if you do, they'll puke her right back up at you. You know, and what some of our literature says, act for us, but don't boss us. I think a lot of trusted servants end up with these positions and they think they have some kind of authority. And they go tell their groups, now you better, you must, you shall. How do you guys take that? Sitting down? I still got a little fight in me. Don't you tell me what to do, you no good. And I think most of us probably feel that way at some level. So that's not a good way to lead. Leaders are made in Alcoholics Anonymous not as a result of what they know or how eloquent the words, but as a result of what they've done. And that's what qualifies people for leadership in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I was a trustee in 2007 was my last year. And the best part of that job was to go see the groups where they were. So a friend of mine was a delegate from Eastern Missouri, and he said, how would you like to come out a few days early from our assembly and just go down into the toe of Missouri, southeast corner, and just see what the groups are doing there. Now, this place is lousy with 2- and 3-person groups every 20 miles or so. And I thought, great, let's do that. So we loaded up in his big Ford, picked them up, and off we go, man. We're doing like a whistle stop. We were getting as many as 5 meetings a day. And I would do little silly things like I'd have a manila folder full of old flyers on some ancient event. And I'd drop them in the middle of the table and I'd say, well, I'm from headquarters. And I've got these incident reports on this group. And I'm here to find out what the hell's going on. And it's amazing. This guy, one of the places said, Fred, I told you we shouldn't have got involved in that. Now I'm curious. Well, what did you get involved in? And then I'd have to fess up. I couldn't leave them hanging, so I'd open it up, the old flyers. We had a big time. Everybody laughed. And I did that for about 3 days. On the last day, my friend Mike said, how would you like to go meet somebody? And I said, I'm all about it. Let's go. So this man was Mr. Leon McGarity. And Mr. Leon sobered up in 1942 in southeast Missouri and basically started AA in southeast Missouri. And he had a big time doing it. And we met him at his house, and he was dressed up in a coat and tie, kind of like the man on the bed picture. He had just come home from church. So I went down into his basement, and it was a museum about Alcoholics Anonymous. And he went over to this old rusty file cabinet, and he pulled out this piece of onion skin letter. And the letter was from Bill, and it was dated November 1950. And he said, Mr. McGarity, he said, I want to take a time to thank you for coming to the Cleveland International. It was a treat meeting you, and I enjoyed your stories about how AA started in southeastern Missouri. He said, your efforts are appreciated, your love, your sacrifice in the furtherance of AA. And he said, it's my hope that as the conference gains acceptance, that we'll be able to elect our trustees from the fellowship. They'll no longer be appointed by this obscure nominating committee, and we're not even close to what Bill's vision was, and he's been gone almost 50 years, et cetera, et cetera. Bill. So he was reading this letter, and tears were running down his face, and he looked at me and he said, it's about time somebody showed up. You know, that takes patience. I said, yeah, well. So we had a great talk for a couple hours. He told me all about he'd been to every international convention since Cleveland. And the first one he missed was San Antonio. And he was sick. And then 2 years after San Antonio, he died, just short of his 70th AA birthday. So we're going to start seeing more and more and more of those, because our fellowship, quite frankly, is getting younger and younger and younger, and there are opportunities to maintain continued sobriety are incredible. I don't know that time means all that much. I do know that after having a little time, we've developed some experience, and I think that's, maybe we've weathered the storm in a few ways or parts. But I always want to be open to a new experience. I don't want to get so bogged down in errata that I can't remain open spiritually to what's happening around me. I've had some health issues this last 5 years, basically. My liver, they found out, was bleeding inside me, and they couldn't figure out how to stop it. That's because I was diagnosed with cirrhosis when I was 29 years old. And people say that you're too young to get cirrhosis, not the way I drank. But anyway, so this has been kind of like the curse that I've been carrying around for a long time. Well, this spring it started bleeding and they couldn't stop it. So I had an internal hemorrhage, and they took me to the hospital, and they still couldn't figure out what was wrong other than the liver was bad. So it's just been in the past few weeks that I've been able to even remotely do anything, and I thought about Jimmy and this roundup, and I thought about several other dates that I'd made to go share my experience, and I thought maybe I should call them and tell them the jig's up and I can't come. But I kept hearing this voice that kept saying the words I can't stand when I'm praying, not yet, not yet, not yet. Let's see how the story turns out. So I didn't do anything. I didn't fight it. I did what the doctor ordered. That's new. And as a result, I'm here. I'm all here. What I got ain't much, but I'm all here, So I wouldn't trade my way of life today, and in the last 5 years, I've been more at peace with God, myself, and my fellows than I've ever been. And I've been at peace for a long time, and I never thought it would be like this. And suddenly, I was put into that place where, in spite of everything, we're okay, all of us. And, let's remember, we're here right now. We're here right now. And right now is all that counts. AA is a 1 minute at a time adventure. So I hope you continue to stay to see and hear how the miracle shows up in your life. Thanks for listening, and thanks for asking me to come.